Welcome to Technique Tuesday. I'm going to give everyone, hello, I'm double live streaming. I got it on the gram and the YouTube, so if you see me looking like this, that's why. This is Technique Tuesday. You guys voted on Instagram to talk about cleaning up your inverts, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to give it a few minutes for everyone to kind of pop in and get settled, and then we're going to get started. And you might see my daughter wander in at one point, but most of you guys know her by now. Make sure you can see me. And if you're tuning in to participate, if you don't have a pole at home, no problem. A lot of this stuff you can do without a pole, or you can just kind of take notes and practice it later when you get to your studio. If you have a pole at home, feel free to follow along. If you're kind of like sneakily tuning into the live stream while you're at work or something, that's fine. Lots of good stuff you can kind of remember. I am going to post this video in an archive on my IGTV. So if you're not my YouTube people, if you are not following me on Instagram, Fox on Instagram. And you can see my archive videos. I am doing free videos every day for the next 2 weeks. So we're on day 3 right now. So definitely make sure you tune in. I'll be advertising these for the most part on my Instagram. But I'm going to start double streaming to the YouTube as well. You guys can't see them, but they're down there. Yeah. All right. So we'll be talking about this in just a minute. I'm going to give it another minute. We'll let people kind of pop in. And I'm missing. All right, so everybody can see me all right. So welcome to Technique Tuesday. I'm Dakota, if you're not familiar with me. And I welcome everybody on YouTube and on the Instagram who are tuning in. I did a poll on my Instagram to see what technique, it could be pole, it could be flexibility, it could have been fitness, any kind of movement technique that people are interested in. I got some really good suggestions from people, and I put the suggestions up for vote. And the one that got the most votes was talking about inverts, creating longer, better lines in our inverts, getting rid of the microbends, and also how to kind of train your inverts to break them down a little bit more so they can be strong and clean, whether you're doing inverts for the first time or you're trying to clean up your aerial inverts. There is something for everybody here, I promise. So, inverts. I wrote my notes over here, so if you see me looking there, that's why. So I wanted to break everything down from the head, starting up here, and then we'll go all the way down to our toes. I think that's just kind of a nice standardized way to think about things for the moment. And even though I'll be talking about things segmentally, they all go together at the end of the day, right? But sometimes it's really helpful to take the time, break stuff apart, and figure out how each individual part contributes to the movement as a whole. So that's why I'm going to break it down like so. So let's talk about your head. Your head has a very vital role as part of our body. I mean, obviously it contains our eyeballs and our brains and our mode for speech and hearing things, right? But the other really cool thing about our head, if you think about it anatomically, our head, when we turn our skull, it completely controls where the rest of our body goes, right? Unless we're sitting here and saying, I just want to turn my head side to side or down and up, okay? But in everyday practice, whenever we turn our gaze to something, I'm looking at something over here, the rest of our body naturally responds to that. So I'm going to shift my spine. I got one side of my pelvis kind of lifting. I'm getting a little bit of a side bend here, and I got a little bit of a pulling everything into center here, okay? So why is this important when we think about pole? This applies to all pole stuff, not just inverts. But where we look when we are doing our inverts is going to directly affect right? How well you do your invert, right? And this is, I'm not saying that's forever. Like if you get really, really, really strong and confident in them, you can probably invert and look at somebody and give them a silly face. But talking about training it and technique behind it, generally speaking, where we look is going to determine where the rest of our body goes. So what I see the most in folks when we're talking about inverts, I'm just going to sit down here for a moment. And you get in your invert position, we'll talk about all this in a second. But one of two things usually happens. The biggest one is we tend to look at the pole, right? And we tend to like kind of look here. Because one, we're afraid the pole's gonna run away from us for some reason. And two, like we're worried about getting our feet onto the pole so we don't fall and die. Okay, if you guys hear something weird, that's my laundry machine. I'm gonna go deal with that. Okay, problem solved. My laundry washing machine is going crazy. So getting back to our gaze, where we look when we do the pull. Where we look is going to generally determine, right, where the rest of our body is going to respond. So when we look at the pull, right, even when we're starting to invert, rock back, and go upside down, if we keep our gaze here, the rest of our body tends to kind of just focus on that, right? And then it's kind of hard to allow yourself to do your complete rock back because you're so focused on this happening here. And that's where you see people do inverts like that, okay? So they're not allowing the rest of their body to move because they're so hyper-focused on their hands, like they're afraid they're gonna let go, the pole's gonna run away. Obviously, we know that's not gonna happen. Pole's not going anywhere. So that's really, really important, and that kind of comes into play for any pull technique you do. So where do we want to look when we do this? Hi. Yes, someone's commenting about my laundry machine. So when we do our inverts, generally speaking, the best place to look is where you want to go, okay? And where you want to go is into an inverted position, right? Not necessarily I want to get on the pole. We want to get the full shebang, right? So to get into a best inverted position, we need to think about looking back behind us. So I go to do like an invert, if I say hyper focus on the hands, my butt stays really heavy and I don't get actually into an inverted position. But when I start to look where I want to go, so I want to go backwards, I want my gaze to be on the ceiling because that means I'm in an inverted position, or you almost want your gaze to be slightly behind you, okay? So when you think about that, sometimes that little small change cleans up some of these inverts so quickly and easily, and they never realize, oh my God, I just had to like look literally into a different position. So that's your head. That's one of the biggest things we need to focus on with the head. Now let's talk about our hands. We don't talk about our hands enough when it comes to pole dancing. But our hands have a very important role. They're kind of what latches us onto the pole besides our legs, right? So my analogy I like to use when I'm teaching is I want you to think of your hands like the wheels of a car, okay? So the wheels in a car are the things that make you go faster, and they're the things that can make you go slower. You can do the accelerator, you can do your brake, okay? So you can pump either of those. And that's what's gonna make the wheel go faster or slower. A wheel is also what keeps us on the road. So that's how we can drive around because we got tires on the asphalt, right? So if you take that analogy to the pole, think of your hands like the whole part of the wheel, okay? And I talked about the gas and the brakes, right? Well, your fingers, for the most part, are going to be your brakes. That's what your fingers do, okay? The palm of your hand is actually going to be the wheel itself. That's what keeps you on the pole, okay? So let me say that again. The palms of your hand is what keeps you on the pole. Your fingers are your brakes. They are what either let you go faster or slower or stay in place, okay? So when we grab the pole, usually when we're first starting out, or maybe we just have this really bad habit we don't know we haven't had for a while, we tend to latch onto the pole really quickly, okay? And I know you guys can't really see this, but you have a pole at home, or even just like grab a soda can or something like that, a bottle of water, okay? You grab the pole, and if we hyper focus on latching on and squeezing the crap out of the pole so hard, okay, we end up leaving a gap right here, okay? And it might be a small gap, or it might be a really exaggerated big gap like this, okay? There's a space between our wheel and the road. So we know that technically driving, that is bad news. If our wheels aren't on the road, something bad can happen, yes? So that means we are hyper-focusing on the brakes, and we aren't actually getting the strongest part of our grip on the pole. Why is this also important? If you go to grab something, say you have your pole or just something at hand, and you latch onto the pole, and then you try to squeeze the pole or that object as hard as you can with your fingers and not really using this so much, you're going to find tension really transferring through your forearm into the elbow. And then you're going to feel like your biceps are turning on really hard too, right? So everything here gets really tense. You can tense everything in your arm and have your back muscles completely relaxed, all right? So when we go to invert, that's bad, right? We actually use our core, that's the back side of our core, your back muscles, to facilitate going upside down. So palm on should be your first way to grab, and then to softly bring the fingers on second, okay? Palm first, finger second. Now you can use those fingers as loose as you want. This is good for like static spins, getting big rotations, or you can keep it latched on pretty tight, and there's your brakes. But we don't need to over grab with the fingers, over squeeze with the fingers. We want our palm to do the best part of our gripping. So if you think about like those, like the old school, like people would have the, you know, the little triangle things, and they sit there and squeeze them, right? If you grab it right, you're actually using this part of your palm, and yeah, your fingers are wrapped around it, but you're not making your fingers stronger. Like, I promise, it's really insanely difficult to make your fingers stronger. Okay, that's a self-defense technique I teach, is the fingers, like, I don't care if somebody's like big and buff and beastly, you can still snap his finger pretty easily if you needed to, because it's hard to like buff up your fingertip and make it have big muscles. So I digress. Anyways, so what I see a lot too when we have this bad grip, improper grip, right? So we have the fingers squeezing more than the rest of our palms. This is where you start seeing that stuff come into play, okay? Because we're relying on our fingers, our forearms, and our biceps to hold us up on the pole, and we are not utilizing our core. So if we can't turn this on, we can't turn this on. If we don't turn this on, you can't turn this on, which means your invert is not going to be super successful or super clean. So we need to think about getting our master grip first, and then we're using everything in here a little bit more. We're going to talk about that in a second, okay? Another thing to think about when you're doing inverts on the pole, when we have our invert grip, so outside hand on top, inside hand on bottom, why this helps counterbalance what you're doing because you're on one side of the pole. We want to make sure that we have a push and pull. I'm sure some of you have heard this many times before, but almost everything we do in pole dancing, there's a push and a pull in there, right? So in this case, it's more of like a squeeze and pull back and a pull apart. So think of this pole right here, and you want to snap it in half, right? That's what's happening with the energy you're giving through the hands down the arms into your back. You're trying to snap it apart, okay? This is really great too, because you can like imaginally raise your hand if this is you, but say you're like going to do your invert and then you start rotating it, okay? One of two things could be happening. One, you could be squeezing your brakes too hard, but two, you are not doing an equal force between both arms with that pull apart. So if I start rotating inwards towards the pole, that means I am doing way too much work with this side of my body, this side of my arm, and not as much with this side. If you do the opposite and you pull with the top arm more, that's where you start to rotate away from the pole, start to rotate open. So that's because this is doing way too much work, and this is just kind of like going along for the ride. So these have to work at the same force level, otherwise you're gonna get those rotations. It's nice to know that little thing, because if you go to practice your inverts at any point and you find that rotation, you can actually fix your invert right away and fix that grip and not have to come down and abort completely. So if I'm up and I'm going to do an invert and I'm here and I start rotating in, I start pulling a little bit more with the other arm and then I can fix myself, okay? So you can stop yourself from doing the swinging. All right, so that's a little bit, we got the head, we got the hands, we started talking about the arms. So let's talk about the arms even more, okay? Engagement with the upper body to get everything turned on. We want to take those shoulders and they need to lift up towards the ears and then down and away from the ears. We're using the muscles around your scapula here. So you're going to think of retracting the scapula down here, right, without letting the chest also puff open, okay? So that's where the core is going to come into play. We'll talk about that in a minute. So shoulders down and back away from the ears. And then we want to create a sense of lift with our chest. So that's when you're in your invert. I'm going to turn this way, okay? And I do my latch in, elbows in, shoulders go down and back. And then before I do anything, whether I'm just doing a practice stronghold for conditioning or I'm trying to actually go upside down, I have to create a sense of lift before these feet ever leave the ground, right? So it's latch on, squeeze down, and then lift, almost like you're trying to get onto the balls of your feet. This is going to make sure, A, you don't jump into the pole, because jumping's bad. You should never jump or swing into your invert. If you're doing that shit, stop it. I'm watching you. But this is also make sure that all of the muscles around here connecting from our hands to the arms are active, engaged, right, and turned on. And I hear people say, I don't know what engaged means. That's what it means to engage. You're using and you're putting your bones in the right place, right? So you become that little robot. So grab, elbows, shoulders down and back, and then it's a create a sense of lift, right? So it's just that little extra whoop, right in there. Now you can practice this guy and make sure you have it right. Elbows, shoulders, lift. If you can lift your toes without sliding or collapsing, then you've got your lift correct. All right. So if you go to do your invert and you find yourself doing that kind of stuff right there, right, this isn't turned on. If this isn't turned on, core can't turn on, which means we cannot tuck back or we cannot go upside down. So you start to see how everything's connected, right? Nerdy and cool, but I love it. So head, hands, shoulders, back and chest. We talked about that. So let's dig into the pelvis now. A lot of these things I'm talking about with you guys, I do want to say this is not the end all be all, right? There are different ways of explaining and doing it, but these are like Dakota's ways, and I am going a little fast because A, this is a free class, and two, we have about like 10-15 minutes left. All right, so let's tackle the core. Engage your core. You hear people say that all the time, right? What the hell does it actually mean? So within the front side of our core, right, that's your abdominal muscles, there's actually different layers of abdominal muscles and they all do different things. Everybody tends to focus on the rectus abdominis, that's your superficial muscles, that's the six pack, right? Everybody wants a six pack, right? They're superficial, that means you can see them and they're not necessarily the strongest muscles and they're not what we use when we invert, right? We don't use them all the way, if that makes sense. I mean, you use everything. But underneath that, you have your transverse abdominis, right? So that's those really strong muscles underneath. And this is like connected into where like the pelvic floor concepts come in. And that is also what helps you utilize the back side of your body too. All right, so I get some more questions. So right in here. Sometimes these people say, use your core, and they go like this, right? And they just like kind of draw everything in right here and they're flexing the front of their abs as much as possible, right? When we want to use our inner layer cores, a couple tips that I like to think about. Take the tailbone and I want to make it long, right? So we all have this little natural curve in our lumbar spine, but we want to make it long, right? Then I want to think about pulling my belly button through my rib cage to the back of my spine. And you can envision that you're wearing a corset. So that corset is, right, locking you in from ribs down to the top of your pelvis, okay? So it's not just here, it's belly button goes back, and you put your corset on. All right, so now you're braced in really, really tight. If you're still not sure you're doing this, 2 ways you can do this. You can do this on the ground, so like you're about to do a hip bridge tape position. Right? So we want to find our strong core. So we pull the shoulders back. We pull the center of the chest in. We drop so the ribs become heavy. Belly button pulls down. Pelvis tucks slightly, and we start squeezing the butt. All right, and then put that corset on. All right. So we're not sucking everything in. It is everything is becoming one mass centered strong unit. It is bound and it is braced tight. Another way to think about it, someone's gonna come punch you in the stomach, right? How are you gonna like resist that punch? You're gonna go like this. You're not gonna go and try and get away from it, okay? So this is one really good way you can practice working on your core muscles. And you can also start going into things like dead bug. When you use your dead bug, right, we're using and bracing your entire core. And this is where you can bring in exercises like the toe taps. You could go into like the hollow body leg extensions. If you don't train your hollow body on a regular basis, you're failing yourself, start training it. Hollow body is like one of the best exercises we can do that incorporates like everything from head to toe. But what we're looking for here is to make sure that we don't start getting that rock back, right? So the front of the pelvis going forward and the tailbone going back. We're not getting an exaggerated arch in here. We're not having space, and then we're not letting the ribs flare open completely. So down and pelvis tuck, lock it in, get punched in the stomach, okay? Those are a few quick tips for that. When we go to invert, we need to make sure that we have that core turned on from head to toe. So long tailbone, butt squeezing, grandpa butt, whatever you want to call it, right? This is going to help make sure that you have the spine aligned in the right space and you avoid the duck butt when you go to invert. If we have duck butt when we go to invert and we're like this, you have to over-exaggerate how you have to turn your core on, and you're creating so much extra work for yourself that you don't need to do. So if we go grab in, shoulders down and back, I'm going to go ahead and pull the belly button back, center of the ribs come in, and butt tucks forward slightly. Now I have everything like locked on, braced from head down to the pelvis, right? And I got that long tailbone. Once you have that long tailbone, and it's kind of tucked under a little bit, so you get a little bit of that posterior tuck, right? Because you need that slight rounded position rather than this, all right? This is also gonna hurt your back, so don't do it. How can you practice that without a pull? V-sits, wonderful, so good for this. You're gonna have that slight tilt with the pelvis, so that slight C-spine. You're also working on bracing the core, bringing it in. Maybe you do toe taps here. You can do your Russian twist. You can start working hollow body, V-sit. These are all really, really easy, quick ways to train that bracing position. I'm trying to think. Reverse crunches. Reverse crunches and plows. I want to talk about these. They're super, super important because a lot of us have a hard time identifying the lower abs, okay? How to turn this part on. If we don't have this part turned on, that's when you kind of get this going, okay? And your hip flexors are really tight. And usually that's because we sit in a car and drive all day, or sit at a desk, or sit in our computer looking at our phones, right? So we have to kind of overcome all that bad stuff we do to our body every day, but we want to create the long tailbone and in here, okay? This is hard for people, this lift. It's like you're taking the underside right around the top of the pelvis and you're trying to pull it up into the ribs a little bit, okay? Right in here, someone's gonna punch you in the ovaries if you have female anatomy parts. But reverse crunches are super awesome for this. Can you do a reverse crunch? And even with bent knees is fine. You can take the hands to the ground, come up. Can you reverse crunch the knees up and just as slowly control it on the way down? That reverse action is so beneficial, okay? So we're trying not to do this is cheating, right? This is you using your bones and flinging your knees up, using momentum. Can you roll up one vertebrae at a time? And can you roll down one vertebrae at a time? Okay, great exercise. If you're like aerial inverting, you know, and you're trying to beast mode those inverts a little bit more, grab something with weight, like this is a 10-pound med ball, and you can take those reverse crunches, like next level, squeeze it between the legs, and then see if you can do that same slow motion all the way in. You can even add the toe taps at the end, just as long as that doesn't happen, okay? Plows are also awesome for a number of reasons. One is kind of over-exaggerate the reverse crunch. That's in there, but it's also kind of the feeling we're in when we go into an invert at the end, okay? So training that plow, bringing some Pilates back to you, rolling down, 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 nice and slow, and then you can finish it, go into hollow body. You might as well, you're already there. You can do these on the pole. So you want to get into your grip position on your ground, on the ground, on your back, okay? This arm might need to turn a little bit more to a push, that outside arm, while you're laying here, just because of how we are established. But if you notice, head and shoulders are in a good position, and my gaze is looking up, right? Yeah, great way to practice where you need to look when you invert, and you're already here, so you don't have to overthink it. All right, so you can reverse crunch, up and down. You could do straight leg reverse crunches, up and down, all right? This is also a great time to start working on your straddles. So I call this the diamond position. It's kind of like a froggy stretch. Toes are pointed together, knees are wide, and I'm already starting to tuck the pelvis into my belly button a little bit, okay? So if you can go from your reverse crunch, peel the knees open right about when they're gonna interact with the pole, and then get your toes to touch the pole, you can roll down, 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 and practice that from there. Really awesome. Slower is better with those. So those are little diamond rocks. The diamond rocks can transition up once you start getting your strong grip really established. So you type both knees up, have the toes together, knees wide, and then you want to rock back, touch the toes to the pole, come back down, all right? Can you maintain your strong grip? Can you maintain your core and maintain that slight C curve in your spine while you continue to do reps of those? Really good. Now I like the diamond position because it also sets us up really well for doing straddles. What happens a lot when we go to do a chopper invert, straddle invert, is we now become hyper-focused on what the legs are supposed to look like, okay? So we're like, oh, the legs, I need to like get them up there, right? And then we kind of end up in this weird position. We don't get up all the way. We don't get the tailbone up because all the focus is going here. And we start to lose connection with all the good stuff we've already practiced. My recommendation is when you go to start your straddles, begin from your diamond position. So those knees are really tucked in. You're in that nice tiny ball. And then you can extend the legs from there. All right. So go with what you know. Go with what you can do effectively. Then add the next step, right? If you are unable to do your rock backs with the diamond, I wouldn't even bother trying to do straight legs yet. It's fine. It'll come, right? Do the things the right way. We can pretty that later. That's what I always tell people, okay? Another great way, keep turning around on you, to practice your reverse kind of crunch plow position from the ground is to either do a clean, invert up to the pole, or if you just, you're not there quite yet, just slide those legs up, get into position, okay? So really think about pulling here, or you can just keep your hand on the ground, just because of how we are. But however you decide to get up, maybe I did my straddle, I'm gonna hook outside leg in front, inside leg behind, keep the knees soft so I can squeeze the thighs together, and then I'm gonna push my butt up.
I have a new shirt.
You do? You want to show everybody your new shirt? This is Ellie, if you guys haven't met her in person yet. So once we get into that invert position, all right, let's get the butt up and out of the way, okay? This is also to make sure we're not squeezing on our hands. That's a talk for another day. From here, we're going to continue pulling the pole down to us. Keep that core brace really tight. And we want to slide back to that diamond position without letting the tailbone touch. From here, work on the straddle, trying to hold that semi-straddle plow and not let this collapse down. And then you can slowly roll all the way down to hollow body, right? So anytime you practice your inverts, if you're still working on this, say you've got your standing inverts, but you're just trying to work on your chopper. Every time you invert from now on in class, once you get up to your invert, you're like, oh, I still need to work on my chopper. Slide down,
Mommy.
tuck your chin,
Mommy.
take the knees in, open to your straddle, sustain it, and then go all the way down.
My shirt.
You got it pretty sure. Into hollow body.
Mom, I need a new shirt.
You need a new shirt. We have to wait till I'm done teaching, remember? All right.
How do you?
Yeah. Toddler long life. There you are. Okay, we'll put it on later, sweetie. Hey, come here. Get mommy just a few more minutes. All right. So those are just a few tips for doing some core-based focus exercises while you're on the ground. Okay. So in final part of this talk today, we're gonna spend about 5 minutes talking about the legs. Now, there is so much I could talk about here. I'm just gonna give you guys a couple. But mostly we want to think about active flexibility and are we engaging the right way? So when we do a straddle or we lengthen the leg, we are doing a leg extension. And this is where you hear your friends or your instructor say, point your toes, okay? So we go, oh yeah, I want to point my toes. We focus on the toes more than anything, right? And this is not really doing very much at all, okay? So to work on getting that nice leg extension, you can start from a seated position, okay? Now make sure we're not rounded and slouched, okay? You can have a slight recline back, that's fine. And then we have that tailbone down nice and heavy, course turned on, yes? Start to see how everything connects and does. Then we're gonna take our feet, I'm just gonna lift this leg for a second so you can see, and I want you to flex your foot so hard that the heel of your foot comes off the ground. If it doesn't come off the ground, it's fine, but I want you to keep that flex. Now you'll notice when you flex your foot like this, you really feel your quads working and you feel your calf muscles working, okay? I mean, everything else is still working too, but these are the ones you're gonna really feel turning on. So do that strong flex. Then you want to work on your full extension all the way through the ankle without letting the heel of your foot touch the ground. And then you notice we have now created a nice long line. We have our pointed feet, right? But we focus on everything from the start to the finish instead of just the end result. When you focus on just the end result, if you don't have really good body awareness yet, or you don't have that active flexibility yet, that's where those microphones come from. So you can just practice that right there, do your flexes, do your points. If you want to level it up, you can grab something smaller than this, but I already have my ball out, so we'll just go with that one. You could practice leveling up, so flex and point, right? And then from here, once you get that flexion and that extension, you want to try and lift the leg up and over an object without letting that stuff happen, okay? So this is nice because you can take your little ball in front of you. You can keep both feet. I'm gonna flex, I'm gonna extend, I'm gonna tap over. Notice I'm also not letting this stuff happen. Brace core, stay strong, going up and over, okay? Then you can start working on this into your straddle. So start with a nice conservative straddle, not your biggest one yet. Do the same thing, flex and point, up and over. Now you notice this is gonna be a lot harder. You're gonna feel that quad really, really working, okay? So the further our legs go into straddle, the harder it is to keep your extension. So you need to train all the way up to those points so that you are conditioned and your body lines everything up like a little circuit board the right way, okay? We don't want to just light up the last thing. We want to light up everything on the circuit board all the way to the end. One last exercise you can try with your straddles, so you guys can see me, is to come seated, right, into maybe not your flattest straddle, but somewhere in the middle, okay? I want you to still be able to work your muscles here. We're gonna do that flexion again, but this time we're gonna keep the heels on the ground, and then you're gonna think of pulling your knees and your quads behind your back. So you're gonna point the toes behind you slightly, start pulling the knees in, right? And if you can see, I'm actually squishing up my yoga mat a little bit. You're gonna feel the inner thighs really working. You're gonna feel your adductors and abductors working. And then from here, we're gonna point a stretch and then find our extension right at the end. So you flex, 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 take all the fight out of those muscles, and then you're gonna go into your extension. That's just a little variation of a P&F stretch for active straddle extension. So toes stick back, open, boom, all right? That's what it's gonna look like when we go upside down to invert, and we're here. Diamond, thighs and knees in, start to extend from the knees, and then all the way through to the toes. So if you're looking for a quick, easy way to condition your microbends, that's a great, great place to start. There's probably 1,000 other ways you can do it, but we only have time for a couple tips today. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. We talked about everything from head to toe when it comes to cleaning up your inverts. And you notice I really didn't even go upside down. This is all stuff you can work from the ground. I think training from the ground is so, so important for us. It allows us to practice everything in a safe space, and it allows us to really make those mind-body connections that we need. We have to have those mind-body connections to be successful once we get up in the air and we start flipping upside down. So if you don't do training on the ground enough, do it some more. I promise it's gonna benefit you. You could do 2 weeks of no inverting on the pole, but just working on all these exercises, and I guarantee your next time you invert is going to be a little bit easier and a little bit cleaner, okay? So if you enjoyed this little free live stream today, make sure you drop a comment. Let me know what you thought. Let me know if you have follow-up questions. Maybe we can cover it in another Technique Tuesday. And bookmark this class, save it for later, share it with your friends. Tell them to like, share, subscribe, and follow, so we can get this information out and more people can have some accessible information that they can do at home on their own, with or without a pole. And make sure you also follow me on Instagram, PaulFitFox, if you're not. And tune into my stories every day for the next 2 weeks. Again, we're on day 3 here. Because each day I'm going to be bringing you guys something new, something different for free, 30-ish minute kind of class or talk. And then I have some really big, exciting news that will be coming in 2 weeks. So you got to follow along, you got to play, you got to try before, you hear what's going to come. So thanks again for tuning in. If you have any immediate questions right now, if you're on live, I can try to answer them for you. But otherwise, I'll see you next time. See you soon.